Hello and welcome back to the channel. As many of you probably already know, I have lately been trying to improve my defensive posture, let's say, for obvious reasons. And not just the equipment that I own, but also the skill with which I use that equipment. And one of the things I've been focusing on particularly is my draw. So like many of you, I'm sure, I've never really had free access to a range that would allow me to draw from the holster on the range and shoot. So I've mostly been relegated to dry fire practice. Now, I've never had any structure to that practice. I know the basic fundamentals of how to draw a handgun, how you're supposed to draw a handgun, but I've never really focused on them heavily. I've never taken any training classes. And in addition to not being able to do live fire, I'd never really timed myself that much. Now, a long time ago, I did some IDPA, but again, that's at least a decade ago. So lately, I purchased a shot timer. And although it won't pick up my hammer strike in dry fire, I am able to set a par time on it. So I was trying to get a sense of where was I at with the speed of my draw to first shot. And turns out I was in between 2.5 seconds, somewhere around in there, not blazing fast for sure. But I wondered, just how well was I following the commonly accepted methodology for drawing the handgun. And I also knew that my cell phone, has the capability of taking slow motion videos, but I've never tried it. So I thought, let's set up the cell phone and let's do some slow motion video of my draw. And what I discovered was kind of shocking, I guess, to me. I always thought that I was doing better than I actually was. So to start out with, let's go ahead and take a look at some of that slow motion footage and break it down and try to see where it is that I'm making mistakes. Okay, so here I am in the living room. I have my shot timer par time set to 2.5 seconds. I'm just going to let it run through one time. That'll give you guys an opportunity to go ahead and look and see what you can find, see what you think I'm doing wrong. And then I'll go ahead and run through it and pause it in various spots and give some commentary and thoughts on what I think I'm doing wrong. So here it is. Okay, so you probably spotted a lot of mistakes in there, but let's go ahead and run through it and I'll kind of give you my thoughts on what I'm doing wrong. Okay, so right away, right off the bat, you'll notice that when I have my garment cleared, my hand should be already on the butt of the weapon, and it's not. So there's time that I'm losing right there. I don't know exactly how much of it is, but every 1/10 of a second counts when you're trying to get down to a 1 second or 1.5 second draw. So that's critical right here. So I would really like to fix that and get my hand on the gun much quicker. So as soon as the garment clears the gun, my firing hand should be on the gun, starting the grip. And speaking of the grip, you'll notice that when I grip the gun in the holster, my thumb is actually going around and it's gripping on the left side of the firearm. And, that actually causes a problem later in the draw that I'll talk about. But just at this point, to get that thumb down in there because I'm wearing an inside the waistband holster,
I have to pull the gun out away from my body to get my thumb in between the two and kind of wedge it down in there. And quite frankly, I think that's unnecessary. And it, like I said, later on in the draw, that'll actually become problematic having the thumb there. So I see that as an issue. Another issue that's really obvious here, and it's funny because I didn't even know I was doing this. I knew that I leaned my body slightly to the left to give myself more room in here to draw the firearm, but it never occurred to me just how far I was leaning to the left. And watching this slow motion video made that abundantly clear. And that's a problem. You know, an efficient draw stroke is about economy of motion. And there's nothing economical about leaning my body over like this. And beyond that, it's really telegraphing my draw to everybody around me. So if I was trying to be surreptitious, this is obviously not going to help, right? People are going to be like, oh, well, why is he leaning over? So that's obviously a problem. Okay. So continuing on, as I draw the gun from the holster, I should, given common convention, draw the firearm straight up out of the holster and then rotate into the close retention position, but I'm not. As soon as the gun clears the holster, I immediately start a straight line out to the firing position instead of coming up in an L shape and then punching out, right? So I see that as an issue as well. And you'll see why here towards the end of this draw stroke. You'll see why just going straight up and out is an issue. Okay, so that's a problem. Now, it's difficult to see. In fact, you can't see it because of the camera angle. But having my thumb down on the left side of the gun, the problem that it's causing is when I go to grip the pistol with my support hand, that thumb's actually in the way of my support hand. So one of two things happens. Either I have to lift that thumb up, get my support hand grip, and then drop the thumb back down, or I just leave the thumb there and then I end up with this weird grip where my firing hand thumb is actually preventing my support hand from fully contacting the firearm. And neither of those outcomes is good, right? So I should have my thumb pointing up when I get to the point where I'm going to grip it with my support hand, and then it's not in the way. And then once I get my support hand grip, that thumb can come down in the traditional thumbs forward grip. So that's a problem. Now, if you watch closely, when the gun comes up into my eyesight, you see that I actually went too high with the gun and it comes down. Okay. And that's part of the problem of going straight from the holster out to the firing position. By the time it comes into my eyesight, into line with my eyes, I've already gone too far and then I have to bring it back down. Whereas if I start with the gun back in close retention and start punching it out straight, the sights are more visible to my eyesight, in the periphery of my eyesight. And plus the motion is straight out rather than up. So there's less of a chance of going too far. And so that makes it a little bit quicker and it's easier to get your sights on target that way. So that's why I really don't want to be going straight up from the holster. Okay. And then there's one really glaring thing right here that maybe you noticed and maybe you didn't, but take a look at my non-dominant eye. I didn't even realize I was closing that eye. Now, in a combat situation, you're already under a high enough stress that, maybe you're experiencing tunnel vision. Why would I want to artificially limit my peripheral vision even further by closing that eye? And it's just the nature of the decades that I've shot firearms in just target practice type shooting where it was okay to close that eye, right? It didn't cause any issues. But that's a problem, and I definitely want to solve it. I don't want that eye closed. And so that's pretty much it. Yeah, my trigger press is all right. My sight stayed aligned with the target. The gun wasn't moving around crazy. So the trigger press part of the draw to fire was okay. But man, there's so much wrong in between. So then I kind of resolved that, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to slow down. I'm not going to use the timer, and I'm going to concentrate on all these things and see if I can fix them. And I videoed myself, and we can take a look at a few of those. Okay, so in this one, again, you'll notice that my hand is taking too long to get to the gun. Even though I was concentrating on it, it's maybe a little bit better, but it's still not getting there fast enough. The grip, my thumb went all the way down on the left side of the firearm, which, like I said, I don't want to do. I want that to be pointing up. And then when I drew, I did come straight up and rotate. However, I didn't end up in close retention. I ended up pretty darn low. And I would expect the gun to be much higher at this point. Also notice that my support hand, that thumb of my firing hand, is in the way. So I'm trying to get that grip, and it's just not going to work that way. Right. So I ended up with a weird grip where my support hand wasn't fully touching the gun. Right. And then again, because I was so low, I'm coming up at an angle, which isn't ideal. And again, I went too high and came down. Right. So let's look at another one real quick. All right, so this time, again, my hand is too slow getting to the gun. And that's pretty consistent throughout. I'm never getting that hand on the gun fast enough. My body's not leaning quite as far over. So I'm reasonably satisfied with that. I still think I could maybe not lean quite as much, but it's not horrible. I rotate around, and again, there's that thumb in the way, right? So still having issues with that. I managed to keep my eyes open. So that's good. But still, there's issues, right? Let's look at another one. Now on this draw, I did a much better job of getting my hand there to the gun faster. That's pretty decent. Could still be a little bit quicker, but certainly better than before, an improvement. I'm not leaning over nearly as much. Gun comes straight up and rotates around, but you'll notice it didn't rotate into close retention. It rotated out in front of my body. So that's an issue. Again, with the thumbs, that's a very consistent problem that I'm just really having a difficult time solving. And my eye did stay open on this one. So all in all, this was a fairly decent one. But still having issues with the thumbs and not bringing it into close retention like it should be, and having it under my dominant eye like it should be. And there was more. I had some that I did where I completely forgot and closed my eye. I didn't have any single repetition that didn't have an issue. So I think you're starting to get the idea.
So you may be thinking at this point, great, you've discovered all kinds of problems with your dry fire, but what's the solution, right? And as it turns out, I do a lot of professional work in instructional design, not firearms related. Nevertheless, the principles hold true for that realm as well. And typically what happens if we have a task that's too complex, and students are having difficulty mastering that task, we simply break the task down into smaller subtasks, if you will. And I think this is a prime example of that situation. You know, I was just assuming that drawing a handgun from concealment was a fairly basic task, but it's not. When you start to break it down and look at those slow motion videos, you see that there's actually a lot more standards that I need to be applying to myself. And if you just take the task of drawing to first shot, if you were to look at all of the standards required for that, you'd realize that the task is much more complex than initially suspected. So that's my intent. That's how I'm going to attempt to fix the problems I'm running into. I'm going to break this task down into a bunch of little subtasks, and I'm going to work on those individually. And then as I go along and I start to master the individual subtasks, I'll start trying to string them together. And I'll try to do 2 at once and maybe 3 at once, until ultimately I get to the point where hopefully my entire draw sequence is going to be much more tight, and follow the standards much more closely. And then ultimately, hopefully, that will also allow me to increase or decrease my draw to first shot time. And you know, my goal is to get, if I could get to 1.5 seconds, I would be really happy with that. I know a lot of the really fast guys out there are doing it in a second, but if I could get to 1.5 seconds, I'd be thrilled. So that's what I'm going to do. And the subtasks will probably, I'm not entirely sure exactly how I'm going to break it up. The first one will probably be clearing my cover garment and gripping the pistol. So that'll be one task. Remember, I want those to be, they can't be simultaneous, but I want them to be as close to simultaneous as possible. So that'll probably be my first task to work on, you know. And some standards there will be that I grip the pistol as quickly as possible upon having the garment reveal the grip to me. Another standard is going to be my thumb will be pointing up instead of wrapping around the grip, right? So those will probably be the standards of that particular task. The next task might be drawing the gun straight up out of the holster. And in that case, the standard is going to be don't lean my body way over to the side, right? That's the thing I'm trying to avoid. That, and just have the pistol come straight up out of the holster until it just clears the holster. The task after that is going to be rotating up to where the pistol's in close retention, high up. You know, the standards are going to be that I don't make any movement out. I simply rotate my elbow down, which rotates the muzzle up, and I end up with my hand up in close retention, and that'll be sort of the standards of that. And so on, you know. I'm going to break it down into these little subparts, and then when I do my dry fire practice, instead of, you know, running through an entire draw where I get parts of it right and other parts of it wrong, I'll just work on the individual parts until I get them right. You know, doing it the entire draw where, yeah, I'm getting pieces of it right, but I'm getting other parts wrong, I'm simply reinforcing those bad habits, and it's counterproductive, right? I'm not actually improving my performance at all. Yeah, so anyway, that's my goal going forward. If you have any comments, any things that you think I'm doing wrong, a better approach to it, feel free to share them in the comments below. You know, I'm always open to advice. I'm not a pro, right? I'm not special forces. I'm not a Navy SEAL, never have been, never will be. So yeah, I'm always open to advice, but I think this is probably going to be a reasonably good approach. And I'll try to shoot some more video as I go along and let you know what my progress is, and let you know if the process is working or not. So yeah, thanks for dropping by, and stay tuned for more.